Her secret fact relates to an earlier secret fact, because when she was in school, she was in a production of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat with Donny Osmond. And apparently he was super nice. Please welcome Tamara Lindeman.
I was 11. All right. Marcia asked me to tell a story that related to a song. So I wrote a song recently about someone that I met over a decade ago. And so I'm going to tell that story. I was 19 and I was working on a film set of a movie of the week about a high school. Nothing to write home about, but there were a lot of young people on the set. And there was this one guy named Andre who was very, very shy and sort of kept to himself. Except this one time he kind of came up to me and he was like, I feel like you should listen to this song. And I was like, okay, sure. And he handed me his Discman because it was 2003. And he sort of gently put his headphones on my ears and played me this song. And it was a beautiful song. It felt like being on a river. Like it started in one place and it ended in a totally different place. And it was very sad, and I'd never really heard anything like it. And I was like, that was beautiful, thank you. And while the song was playing, he just actually kind of stood there and kind of waited and kind of like looked away so I could listen to the song in private. And it was actually a 6.5 minute song, so that was saying something. And then he was like, oh, I thought you'd like it. And then he kind of disappeared. And then 6 months later, we crossed paths again. And this time he asked if we could hang out. So we hung out. We met at Grange Park behind the art gallery. And it was beautiful, it was sunny, it was the beginning of summer, and we lay on the grass and we just talked. There was always something about him that I noticed. For one thing, he was just a really beautiful person. He was one of the most beautiful people I'd ever seen. He had long, curly, dark hair and sort of these huge eyes and this very sort of otherworldly thing to him. But there was something else about him too. He really didn't feel like he was from here. He felt like he was from somewhere else, and he felt sort of simultaneously very, very present, but also like he was a million miles away. And he projected this gentleness that I never really met someone like that. So I asked him where he was from, and it turned out he was from this very small town in Newfoundland. So he told me about that, but he mostly told me about this little island where he really felt like he was from, which is an island that his family had been from for as long as anyone could remember. They actually didn't know when they'd arrived, but hundreds of years. And then in the 60s, they'd resettled. The government had resettled all these little islands off of the coast of Newfoundland to the mainland. So he'd grown up in town, but he'd spent all his summers on this beautiful island that he felt very attached to. And at one point I was just kind of moved, and I just kind of took his hand, and he just sort of held my hand. And then that was kind of it. We were kind of basically inseparable from that point on. And we fell in love. And we spent the summer together. We used to go on these sort of long walks. I don't remember really what we talked about, but I remember sort of the sensual aspects of being together. And I remember he was kind of an odd guy, and he used to he had this weird habit that he'd like pick like leaves of grass or whatever and just sort of chew on them as we walked through these urban parks, which I understood because I was actually from rural Ontario, and I grew up fairly isolated, kind of in the woods, and I'd spent a lot of time alone, and I also would chew on grass or trout lilies or edible plants. I was really into wanting to survive in the woods. And it was like there was this part of me that, because of the way that I was raised, there was this part of me that was very private and secret that I'd never really revealed to anyone, which was that I was just so sensitive. And Andre was the first person that I ever met who I felt kind of met me there. And we sort of understood each other in this really poetic way that was just utterly surprising to me, and I thought I would never meet someone who understood me in that way. Another wonderful thing was we Andre was really into music, and he played guitar, and he found out that I could sing, and he got really excited because he kind of couldn't sing. He kind of had a terrible voice. So I would sing and he played guitar, and then he was just like, we got to make music. We got to like do a thing. And I was like, okay, yeah. And he'd walk around. He had these little like mini tapes, and I'd go to bed and he'd be like walking the streets at night, like coming up with these like song ideas. Yeah, he just kind of was always going. At the end of July, oh yeah, I was gonna say that it was, even though we're both very serious, you can probably get the idea, we're both very serious people, but it was very not dramatic. It was very just simple. It was like, I don't remember saying I love you, because it was just like, obviously we loved each other, and obviously, the only thing I remember thinking was like, I'm 19, like I'm not supposed to be like I'm not supposed to meet my true love now. I'm supposed to like get my heart broken and like be in all these relationships. I'm not supposed to like meet this person, but the fact that I had, it was like this big weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and I felt so happy. So at the end of the summer, he went back to Newfoundland to visit his family. And I actually had to work. I was doing this other job, so I couldn't go, and I was working really late one night. And I got back, and it was about midnight, and there was this message on my phone, and it was from his father's partner, Wendy, and she said, there's been a problem with Andre. Give me a call back. And I was like, oh, that's sort of weird. And my heart kind of started racing. But then I was like, well, like she would have said it was something serious. If it was serious, like I was like kind of parsing the grammar. I was like, there's been a problem with, what does that mean? So I was like, well, it's midnight. So I went to bed, and I kind of lay there. And then I kind of started thinking like, but if something had happened, he would have called me himself, like if he was hurt or something had happened. So I just sort of called the number, and his father picked up. His name was Bill, and Bill said like, "You're Tamara. He's told us so much about you, and he's told us that he loves you." And I was like, "Okay, is he okay?" And he was like, "No, he passed away." And I was like, it sort of seemed like, sorry. Oh no, this is embarrassing. Anyway, and it was very shocking, obviously, and it sort of seemed like a bad dream, or like, like the narrative of the story was, we met and we fell in love, and it was meant to be, and that was the story. And then suddenly it was this whole different story that didn't make sense and had nothing to do with my experience up to that point of life. I was 19. And it kind of felt like I was like living on one planet where things kind of made sense and had this sort of narrative logic. And then in that moment, in that phone call, it was like I moved to a totally different planet, and the rules were all different, and I never could go back to the one where I started. I should explain too, because I meant to put this in. Marcia coached me very well. The way that Andre died, it was very strange. He went out to the islands where he was from, and he was out there with some friends, and they were sort of walking and goofing around, and as was his habit, he was sort of like eating flowers and plants that he found, and they were all laughing at him because he'd always done that, and they were like, oh, Andre's so strange. And one of the flowers that he had eaten was a flower called monkshood, which is like a very dark purple flower. It's actually very beautiful. It grows wild, sort of in the boreal forest. I've seen it many times. And it's incredibly poisonous. And he passed away within 3 hours. So there's a lot more to this story, obviously. But a couple days after I got back from the funeral, which is in and of itself a whole different story, I went back to his apartment, and I wasn't sure what to take or what I wanted, but I just took a couple of the little tapes that he had been recording on his dictaphone, his sort of song ideas. And I took them home and I listened to them, and that sort of grew into this whole other thing where I made this crazy decision that I wanted to be a musician. And I became a musician, which is really crazy. So, and that was sort of where it started. So, oh dear, now I have to play a song. So anyway, a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago, I was like cleaning out my apartment and I came across all these little tapes. And I was thinking, nowadays we have smartphones and all these things happened in the last 10 years. And we don't use little tapes anymore, obviously. Anyway, I'll play a song now. I found the little tapes you kept under your bed, and I played and played and played them over and over again. Years ago, walking alone, you say, in your high, strange voice, your feet scuffing along the pavement, trying to sing what you meant. Late at night, it was too important. Ooh. I'm older now than you ever were, or ever would become.
Tamara Lindeman.